James Bond.
Hello friends, welcome back to the Citizen Geek channel. As always, I am your host, Maddie G, and today I'm going to be sharing my thoughts with you on the new film, Spectre. Spectre is the 24th film in the James Bond movie franchise, and it's the fourth and possibly last film to star Daniel Craig in the role of James Bond. The film follows Bond as he tracks down a mysterious organization known only as Spectre, an organization that seems to be responsible for a number of terrorist attacks all across the world. And as Bond continues to follow the clues that lead him down the path toward discovering this mysterious organization, he also starts to discover that he himself might have a personal attachment to this group. Spectre was directed by Sam Mendes, who also directed the previous Bond film, Skyfall. Now, Skyfall was kind of an anomaly in the James Bond franchise. Not only was it a mega hit, in fact, it was the most successful James Bond movie of all time, the first to cross $1 billion at the box office. It also became a surprising critical hit, too. And both of these aspects have kind of brought on a new level of pressure when it comes to the new film in the series. Now, a lot of people have been pretty hard on Spectre, especially when it comes to comparing it to the previous film, Skyfall. Let's talk about some things that I liked about Spectre. First off, this movie is gorgeous to look at. It is absolutely stunning. It continues the tradition of the most recent Bond films in that, on a technical level, it's incredibly well made. It looks beautiful, the cinematography is great. This film is actually shot on 35mm, and it brings kind of a darker, kind of shadowy tone to the whole film. On a technical level, Spectre is amazing, just as good as Skyfall, and in some cases I think it actually improves on it. Particularly the opening sequence in Mexico, I think is absolutely amazing. Hands down one of the best moments in any James Bond film. Starting with the opening scene of the film, in which we watch for about 5 minutes with no discernible cuts as Bond travels through the Day of the Dead festival in Mexico City, up through a hotel and across a couple of rooftops to find a target of his, and culminating in a spectacularly insane helicopter fight. Doing these long uncut takes seems to be kind of a popular thing for filmmakers these days. It seems to have become kind of a way of them showing us how talented they are. Last year we had Birdman, which was done in the style of one completely long uncut take. Daniel Craig continues to prove that he might be the best James Bond, at least the best Bond since Connery. He brings a real humanity to Bond, and even when he's engaging in these insane action sequences and, betting all these beautiful women and killing people and just, doing everything that James Bond does, we still see the human being inside, which is not something that you can say for every actor who's played James Bond. Some of them have played him as more of a cartoon character. Craig has always brought a real soul to Bond, a damaged soul to be sure, but definitely a soul. And that continues in Spectre. I also thought Léa Seydoux made a really great addition to the Bond franchise. One of my big issues with Skyfall, one of my really only issues with Skyfall, but it was a big one, was the way that they handled the female characters in that movie. It's pretty much a film where all three female characters have story arcs that involve them being depowered. But Seydoux's character, Madeleine Swann, actually gets to have a real story and a real arc to her character, and she gets to have a real personality. She falls kind of somewhere between the intelligent, doesn't take shit from Bond attitude of Vesper Lynd and the tougher, can handle herself in a fight kind of personality of Camille from Quantum of Solace. Her character isn't just brought in as eye candy or a sexual conquest for Bond. She's a layered character, which is something you don't see in a lot of Bond girls, and Seydoux does an excellent job of playing that. I've been a really big fan of Seydoux for the past few years. She's done a lot of really strong supporting work in movies like Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, The Grand Budapest Hotel, Midnight in Paris, Inglourious Bastards, and she also gave an amazing performance in one of my favorite movies of all time, Blue is the Warmest Colour. I also really like the addition of Dave Bautista here, aka Drax from Guardians of the Galaxy, as the new hench villain, Mr. Hinks. He doesn't have a lot of screen time in this film, but he's always memorable. There's one sequence in which he and Bond engage in a kind of knockdown, drag-out fight throughout a train, which plays very much as an homage to the famous train fight sequence in From Russia with Love. One thing that I really did like about the movie was the way that they brought kind of the rest of Bond's team into the film and gave them kind of bigger roles to play and brought them kind of out into the field for a bit. I thought that was a lot of fun. It reminded me a bit of the more recent Mission Impossible films, and I thought that was really cool. The Bond movies tend to focus more on him as kind of a solo character who just kind of goes off and does everything on his own. So bringing this team into the field to kind of help him, it mixed things up a bit, and I thought that was really fun and really interesting. It was also nice to see Moneypenny get some real stuff to do here. I was really disappointed with her character arc in Skyfall. Her storyline through that whole film was basically her coming to the decision that she didn't feel comfortable working in the field and would be better behind a desk, which I did not appreciate at all. So I really liked that they brought her back out into the field in this and kind of showed that, yeah, you know, she can handle herself and that she can do more than just be a secretary, you know. I appreciated that. Now, while there's a lot to like about Spectre, it definitely has some issues, mostly in the story. It just doesn't tell a very strong story. A lot of the time it feels like they're trying harder to reference classic James Bond stories and themes and images than tell a solid original story. There are points where this movie just gets flat out goofy and kind of jumps away from all sense of logic whatsoever. The "I'd recognize you anywhere" moment comes to mind. And while it does have some big character moments for Bond, it feels like it's missing the emotional resonance that Skyfall had. And as a result, some of these moments that are supposed to feel really emotional don't quite have the punch that they should. They still work to an extent because we've been with Craig's version of Bond for, 4 films now, and, his current crew, so we have a familiarity with them, and so there is still something there, but it feels like there could have been a lot more, and it's just lacking, and that's disappointing. I also was disappointed with Monica Bellucci's role in this movie. Monica Bellucci is a great actress, and while her being in this film has been touted so much and there's been so much talk about it, it really only amounts to what's basically a cameo. She's barely in the film and doesn't really do much. She's great when she's in it, but she's barely in it. I also think the overall villain is disappointing, and this is where I'm going to get into some spoiler alerts, so I'm going to put it up here and say spoiler alert, although I think most people kind of already know where this is going, even if you haven't seen Spectre yet, but still, I'm just going to do that just in case, so spoiler alert, if you don't want to know anything more, just stop now. It's not really a surprise that the character that Christoph Waltz is playing, Franz Obenhauser, actually turns out to be Ernest Stavro Blofeld. Ever since they announced that the movie was going to be called Spectre, everybody pretty much figured that he was actually playing Blofeld. And so when they finally reveal it near the end of the movie, it plays kind of the same way that the Khan reveal in Star Trek Into Darkness did. It's a bit clunky, like mostly because it doesn't feel like it really means anything. It really only means something to the audience, because in this story, Bond has never heard the name Blofeld before. So the name Blofeld really means nothing to him. It feels like it's just put in there for us, the audience, to be like, oh, it's Blofeld, even though he's been going by this other name for the whole movie for no real discernible reason. And in fact, his other name, Franz Obenhauser, actually means more to Bond anyway, because that was the name of his childhood kind of adopted brother. So the Blofeld reveal, it just plays a bit clunky. The subplot featuring the other main villain of the film, C, played by Andrew Scott, also feels pretty lacking. This is another film that pulls really heavily from the whole, like, Edward Snowden, the government is always watching us storyline. And while that can be interesting, it just feels a little too obvious here, and it's just, it's not handled very subtly or very well. There's never a question whatsoever that he's a bad guy. It doesn't help that they hired the guy who plays Moriarty on Sherlock to play this character, and that he's kind of playing, like, a variation on Moriarty in this film. So, like, as soon as he walks onto the screen, you're like, well, this guy's a villain. There's no question about it. I don't trust him. So the villains overall were a bit disappointing. Okay, guys, so, yeah, Spectre isn't a perfect movie, but I still think it's a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. I think some people are comparing it a little too harshly to Skyfall. It definitely is lacking some of the things that movie had that made it really stand out from the previous Bond films. But if you're interested in watching a solid, really entertaining Bond movie, Spectre will definitely fulfill that. And I'll say this too, because at this point we don't really know if this is going to be the final Craig Bond movie or not. It's been kind of wishy-washy. He said some things, and some people have said, yeah, he'll be back, and some people said, I don't know. So it could go either way at this point. I almost kind of hope that this is the last film for Craig's version of Bond, just because I feel like the way that everything ties together and the way that they end the movie feels like a real wrap-up for Craig's version of Bond. So whether they end up doing another film with him or not, I'll be curious. But if this ends up being the last one, they will have sent him out in a pretty satisfying way, for me at least. Alright guys, thanks very much as always for joining me here on Citizen Geek. Please leave a comment below, let me know what you thought of this video, let me know what you thought of Spectre if you saw it. Did you think it was a disappointing addition to the Bond canon, or did you have a lot of fun with it? Would you like to see Craig's version of Bond come back for another film, or were you happy with the way that they kind of wrapped up his storyline in this one? Let me know what you think. Thanks guys for watching as always, I really appreciate it. Like, share, subscribe if you enjoy what I do. Take care, and as always, I will see you again real soon.